Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we'll select the Zevachim daf Ayin. We're going to begin on Ayin but Aleph, 6 lines from the top, with the words Omer Le. So we were learning in yesterday's daf a Machlokas Rameir and Rabbi Huda. If a person did Malika, or for that matter Shchita, and it turns out that this bird is a treifa, so typically speaking, when it comes to a bird, there is no tumas magomasa. However, there is a tumah called tumas begadim abesa bliya, that if you eat this food while it's in the vela, this bird, so the din is that when you eat it, it makes your clothes tummy, and v'rachas basar b'mayim, you have to cleanse your garments, and it's tummy until the morning, until next day, or ad ha'erev. So Rameir holds that as long as you did the malik or the shchita, that no longer takes upon itself the typical din of being matam gan mesabliya, and it's removed. And he learns it out through a kal v'chomer. Rabbi Huda says no. The reality is, it doesn't matter, certainly not my malika, but even by shchita, the din is that the tumah stays. The tumah stays. And he ended up learning it out from the pasuk that said in the veil of a treifa, the fact that you have these two psukim linked to one another. So he learns out to tell you that that pasuk is coming to include a treifa sheshachta shimatama. That this pasuk in the veil of treifa, in which it says that you're not allowed to eat it, so also there's a din tuma that remains. So again, according to the Shita of Rabbi Huda, if you do shchit or malika, it doesn't remove the shem tuma. And then we ended up asking a question when it came to the pasuk that says v'chelev nevela v'chelev treifa, in which the pasuk tells us that if you have an animal that dies, it's a nevela or a treifa, so it says if you touch it, then there is a din tuma. We know that by touching a nevel of a behema, so there's a tumas mago masa, but there's an interesting status when it comes to the chalev. When it comes to the chalev, if a behema becomes a tray for nevel, even though you're not allowed to touch the animal, but the fats are tahar and mutter for use, and there's no tumas nevela on them. So that is an interesting concept that's brought down, in which the pasuk says v'chel neveh v'chel treifa ye'asel chol malacha. You can use it. Of course, you obviously can't eat it, the pasuk says. Seems pretty obvious, but nonetheless, that's the din. So based on that, we wondered, well, the fact that you have nevela and treifa also in the same pasuk, maybe therefore that should tell us that it's different when it comes to, just like Rabbi Huda said, that nothing changes. So to maybe over here, we should say the same thing by a treifa. So that's where we left off. And then we ended up saying a chaya, we talked about a chaya, which also has a unique din. A behema chayil is aser. And these are non-kosher fats. However, that does not apply to a chaya, in which therefore the chaya's chayil has the same din as the basar. So therefore maybe we would have said a chaya is different than a behema. Kamashman, that even a chaya, the same dinim apply. Okay. Armalei. So Maishna Tameya de ein chel b'cholok mibsara, Chayanami ein chel b'cholok mibsara. So he said like this. This is a kasha. How come when it comes to the chalev of a animal, so we say that it does not make any difference between its basar. So we should say the same thing by a chaya, that the ein chel b'cholok mibsara, that there should be no difference. Let's look at Rashi. How come Tameya delo nafkalin latahir chelba mahaikra? We don't say that by a Tameya that it's chelav is tahar. It's only by a behema kosher, which has became a treifa or a nevela. The ein chel b'cholok mibsara, because in that situation comes to a behema, which is tameya, a non-kosher animal. There's no difference. The basar is usher just as much as the the chelev. V'lo krinin be b'ochlo lo solchluhu l'chel l'chudei. Sure, I call iser. Everything is usher if we're dealing with a non-kosher animal. So chayinami in chel b'cholok mibsara li'isuro. So when it comes to a chaya, it's the opposite, but they're both the same. That just like a non-kosher animal, the chelev and the basar are mutter, or usher, pardon me. So when it comes to a chaya, the chelev and the basar is mutter. So for that same reason, we should not apply the pasuk when it comes to a chaya, because it's not comparable to a behemoth tahara. Furthermore, based on the pasuk itself, you can ask the question that apparently this pasuk is not talking about a chaya, the chelev of a chaya. How do we see this? It says v'achlo sachluhu, that you cannot eat it. Says Rashi, the haksiv v'achlo sachluhu kaman alfina mina bebrais mishmaisin b'chelev chaya nevela lo tihir mechal tuma. That when it comes to actually a chaya, it does not remove its status from tuma. It only works by a behema. So el omer baya treifa l'gufi yitzrach. Actually, in order to, as Rashi says, l'tayr chelev treifa shemesa, to be matayr the chelev of a treifa that died, which we have a pasuk, so we need that pasuk to teach us this very din itself. Shalo timer, you shouldn't say hoyel v'tamei sura machayim, since something which is a non-kosher animal, right? You could say a non-kosher animal we know is always not kosher, even while it's alive. A treifa sura machayim, the treifa also never, because it's a treifa, even while it's alive. I shouldn't say never. Treifa at this time, even while it's alive, is aser. So you should compare a treifa to a non-kosher animal. Ma tameya chelba tamei, its fats are tamei. So av treifa chelba tamei. So maybe we should say the same thing when it comes to a treifa, which is why we need the pasuk to tell you that no, when it comes to a treifa, even though machayim, so a nevela is not a question, but the treifa is the chiddush, because you would think maybe to compare the treifa to a non-kosher animal, they're just like a non-kosher animal while it's alive, it's still aser. So a treifa while it's alive was already aser. So therefore, you would think to compare them, just like by a non-kosher animal, the meat is the fats are aser. So too, the nevela, also the fats are aser. In other words, there's a din tum on it, and you can't do whatever you want with it. So you need the pasuk to say treifa dafka over there to teach us goof of the craw. So yihachi, so hainamin beboy, you shouldn't say hoya ba'oiv tami ta aser b'achila. We know that a non-kosher bird is aser to eat. But treifa aser b'achila, and a treifa is also not ought to eat. So you can say ma'ov tami when it comes to a bird. Ein matama, it's not matama b'gan meisa b'liya. So I've treifa and a matama, right? So this actually is a question on Rabbi Yehuda, right? Who says that the tumas begun by Besabliya still works. The ode mi'ikal a male of treifa matama. You understand? How could you compare a treifa to a non-kosher animal? Because they're not the same thing. Tameya lo haisala shasa kosher was never kosher. Treifa haisala shasa kosher, right? Before it was a treifa, it was kosher, right? It was born as a kosher animal. So the chitem a treifa mibeten Michael Maimar. So maybe it was always a treifa, even from inception, right? From the very time it was born. So bimina miaika. However, again, its species is kosher. So therefore, you why would you even think to compare the two? Elo Omer Rava, here finally we have an interesting teretz, the beautiful shita of Rava, that the Hatayra Amra, Yobo Isser Nevela, let the Isser Nevela come, V'yachal Isser Chalev, Yobo Isser Treif, V'yachal Isser Chalev. Namely, normally we hold an Isser Chal Isser, and you can't be chayiv twice. However, in this case, the pasuk is saying that if you eat from its chalev, the fats, you're chayiv two isurim. You're not just for isur of eating chalev, but also eating either a treifa or nevela. And v'tzricha. Now, even though normally we would say, again, in isur chal isur, we still will say, you shouldn't say, says Rashi, Sholotamer, in isur nevela v'treifa chalon al isur chalev, should call them a kulon, especially because it started off being aser. Okay, so the answer is like this: why do you need treif and nevela? That there's a separate iser. Diashmina nevela mishum and matama. If you want to talk about the case of nevela, there's a din of tumas. Says Rashi, hilka chamiru l'choyel al iser chalev. So therefore, because there's a din tumas nevela, typically, so therefore maybe because of that, we'll say that there's a separate isser. Avol treifa emelo. When it comes to treifa, maybe not. V'yashmin and treifa mishum the isser machayim. As we said, the treifa was already usher from the time it was alive. On the veil emelo tzricha. So this is all the Shitas Rabbi Yehuda that holds that when it comes to a bird, if you did the shchita or the malika on it, it doesn't remove the tumas beis abliya. So Rabbi, who holds that it is removed, so hay treifa ma'yavadalei. What does he do with this pasuk, which seemingly shows that that it's not true? Now Rabbi holds that oiv shchitas metaharasa treifasai, as we saw in the Mishnah in yesterday's daf. So what does Rabbi do with this? He comes to say, if you did the shchita lifnim, as we saw in yesterday's daf, and Rashi quotes it, ma treifa sheshava bifnim kibachutz. It has to be a treifa in which the dinim of the inside and the outside are the same. Yotza hashoichet oiv chulin bifnim, which is the dinim are not the same. If you would do shchita of an oiv chulin bifnim, as opposed to b'chutz. Okay. So therefore it comes to exclude shchita bifnim. Rabbi Yehuda, treifa chrinik sivi. So he learns out from another pasuk that tells us to exclude shchita lifnim. Avra Meir. So what does he do with that second pasuk? So chad l'muti shchita shilifnim, v'chad l'muti oiv tamei. The other one's coming to exclude a non-kosher bird. Rabbi Yehuda min nevela nafkale. We're going to learn out from the din of a nevela to automatically exclude a non-kosher bird. Says Rashi, Rabbi Meir, hi kro yisera de nevela lo yoichel meboyin le'lama tumaso shein matama elo kishi. Okay, fine, didn't get to that yet. So Rabbi Yehuda says you learn it from nevela nafkale. Rabbi Meir, how does he know hi nevela my ovenly? What does he do with naval? What does he do with this pasuk? L'shiur, right? L'shiur achila b'kazayis, to tell you that when it comes to swallowing a bird, the amount has to be the size of kazayis for it to take effect. I have a typically mikra kama. When you learn from the pasuk before, mid afkar achamon b'lashon achila. And achila is a kazayas. L'chad l'shir achila b'kazayas. L'chad l'shir achila b'chtei achilas pras. So first of all, it's the amount, but also the time. You would think because this whole thing is a unique concept, so maybe it's not limited to a time frame, then we say it's matama begun me'esabli, even if it's more than kadei achilas pras. Okay, so that's how we explain that. Taraban, v'chelev nevela, v'chelev treifa. So when the pasuk talks about the fats of a nevela and a treifa, as we said, this unique din that the fats are tahar and mutter for use, and there's no tumas nevela upon them. So, what are we talking about over here? It's bechel behema tahara kasmadaber. We're talking about a kosher animal. So, I talk about bechel behema tahara kasmadaber in ela bechel behema tameya. Maybe the pasuk is telling you that it's talking about the fats of a non-kosher animal, so that they're fine. So Amrit tihar mechlal shchuta v'tir mechlal chelev. So it has to be that when it comes to the shchita, that is mataher the meat, and also it's mataher regarding chelev. So ma kishehi tahar mechlal shchuta v'tahara. We know that the only time you can eat the meat is only if it's kosher animal. V'lo b'tameya. Obviously, if you do a beautiful shchita on a pig, it doesn't do anything. So av kishetir b'chalal chelev b'tahar v'lo b'tameya. So too, when it comes to the chelev, it's only talking about a kosher animal, but not a non-kosher animal. Or maybe flip it on its head and say, no, tir b'chalal nevela v'tir b'chalal chelev. When we say by nevela, it could be tahar, is betame v'lo b'tahara, is only something which is tame and not tahar. When we said by when we say it's tahar, it means that it's there was a din tum on it. So av kishetir b'chalal chelev. Now that we're mastering the chelev, is betum v'lo b'tahara, is only maybe by non-kosher animal. Says Rashi, by oif tame tihar mulatame beisabliya. Maybe that's what we're talking about. V'lo of tahar. Maybe we're talking about a non-kosher bird, not a kosher bird. So Amrit, so we say, come on, that can't be. Kishabah b'derech zu. When you go in this direction, but tahara kishabah derech zu hi b'tameya. What does that mean? Says Rashi, Hilkach Medina lo nafka. You can't learn out from here. Talmud lemer treifa. Kishbol zu hu tameh. Talmud lemer treifa. Mishesh b'mina treifa. It's only something which in itself has the capacity of being a treifa. Oitzias hatameh, a non-kosher animal, shed b'mina treifa. That the animal itself cannot become a treifa. It's just non-kosher to begin with. Well, oitzias a chaya, or we're not going to exclude a chaya shesh b'mina treifa. That is shaykh. Talmud lemer ba'achol lo sachluhu. Mishachelbo aser b'sara mutter. It's only when the chelev is aser but the meat is mutter. Yotzachaya shechelbo b'sara mutter. It's coming to exclude a chaya in which the chelev is also mutter. Question 13. Basar behema tameya. Basar chaya chelev behema tameya v'chelev chaya im yesh lehem tumas nevela. So let's start off talking about a chaya. Chelev chaya is tame. We know that the basar behema chaya is tame, but the chelev behema tamei is okay. Let's read this whole thing. Basar behema tameya is still tame. Basar chaya is tame. So the basar behema tameya, or the basar of a chaya, is tame. Again, we're talking about that's it. Okay, there's a din tuma on it. Chelev behema tameya tame, chelev chaya tame. What are we saying over here? Basar behema tameya, basar chaya, chelev behema tameya, chelev chaya, im yesh lehem tumas nevelos. So basically, we're saying by all of them, there's a din tuma. Okay. Yatzachaya shechel b'basar mutter. Amali Rav Yaakov bar Abba lo Rav el miyata nevelos behema tahara hu dematama. So nevelos behema tahara, a nevel of a kosher animal, in which we say regarding its chelev that you can do whatever you want with it. Nevelos behema tameya lo matama, but we know it does. So Amalei kamat sabi shabishto. How great is this mistake? But Seifa Atoyin Levelos Oif Tame. The Seif is talking about the Levelos of Tame. Rabbi Yochanan Loti Rabbi Meir. The only time Rabbi Meir said the din that this if you did the shechita or the malika on the bird that it removes tumas it removes the tuma besabliya, is only elo b'temimim, which is similar to what the Mishnah said. If it's a broken wings and stuff like that, of a bali mumin loy. But when it comes to a bali mum, no, because we know. Okay, fine. Let's just keep it. Let's just see it that way. Okay, he only says it when it comes to a tamim, but not a bal mum. What's his bal mum? The tumas basically remains. No, I feel about bal mumin. Even when it comes to a bal mum, the tumas basically is removed from the bird. If you did the shechita and the malika, itrinam yom rav bibi omer Rabbi Elazar metayr hoya through malika. Rameir will mater b'bali mumin, right? He'll be mater even bali mumin. And here's the kicker: the afil b'avazim v'tarnegoyim, even avazim v'tarnegoyim who aren't even, they're not even fit to be put on the mizbeach. Says Rashi, when it comes to geese and roosters and chickens, the labanim mizbeachein ulvad shehi kodshim bifnim da treifa nami ulchazia, because we know a treifa is not fit, right? B'toyerin b'nei yoina v'tihara hoyo umalika hechsher kodshim bifnimhu. So he holds that when it comes to, as we saw a couple of dafim ago, right? We said, well, it says Tarin shel higi zmanam b'nei yoina shav zmanam. So apparently he holds that takid is not matama besabliya, which again doesn't sound like. It sounds unlike our Mishnah, but maybe it doesn't hold like this part of the Mishnah. Anyway, he holds that even when it comes to bali mumin, or even things that are not fit to be put on the mizbeach, like these birds, b'nei yoina or turim, which have to be a particular age, and if one is too young, one is too old, so then it's not fit to be put on the mizbeach anymore. Nonetheless, it removes tumas besabliya, so it's the same thing bal mum or avazim v'tarnegom. It's the same thing. So Rabbi Yirmiyah. Oiref Eiz Mahu. Let's say, just like an egla rufa, you broke the back of the neck of a goat. Avazim Tarnegolim Taimamai. Why does he say that it removes the tuma? Because the mina the ofas they're the same type of bird. It's a bird. It's a type of a bird. Aval Eiz La Mina the eglahu. It's a calf. Maybe it's not the same. We say that it falls under the category of like a behemoth. Says Rashi, Mahu Ramei. How does Ramei understand this? Mi amrinan ki heichi de matayr malikas avazim kanjim bifnim hoyo umalikas shum oif bifnimhu, because any bird can be done inside with malika. So hachinami arifa hechsher taharis agalahi midinavela, maybe the same thing or maybe not, right? Because it's not a bird, right? Shazumin gasav, zumin daka, right? Okay. So the Gemara answers like this: Yosef Rabdimi v'karmel lo hashmaisa samar lebai machlal the eglo rufa taharahi. 1 second. So are you telling me that maybe an eglo rufa does remove its tumah, and therefore that was the whole question? Do we compare it to an A's? Yes, that is the starting point. Amri Rav Yanai. Kapar ksibok kachim. It says the din of kapar, which has the same din of like kachim. So Master Rav Nasim Ravu to Rav Huna Bar Nasan the oichlo sachuhu. The pasuk says you can't eat it. Obviously the chayil of the vil and treifa, but you can use it. Maybe the only time we matter the use of this chaylev is only because it's aser b'achila, but it's mutar b'hana, right? That's it. Chaylev shel shara nisko the egla ruva menayin, because that's even aser b'hana. Talmud Leimer kol chaylev all chaylev, even if it was aser b'hana, if it's we're matter here, just like we're matter the veil and treifa. So too, the egla roof. But if you tell me it's tahar, hi tahar v'chel b'tameh. This is a case where the that he tahar v'chel b'tameh. So heichid araf. No, so we're talking about before. The question was before the egla roof was done. No, we're talking about a situation where it was already done. So mi'arif lo tzrichale. Don't right? What do you mean? That certainly is not a question, because in that case everything is usher. Let's say you took the egel rufa, but you didn't do it the right way, the shchita. Now we say that when it comes to that, at least it removes the din nevela. L'tzricha shemesa, it just died. So machlal the machayim asura, which is mashma while it's alive, it's aser. In Amram Yane Gavul Shemati, there was a border time in which it becomes aser while it was alive. Shachachti the nismin chavri l'meimar yiridasel l'nachal isan hi asarta. That even while it's alive, the egla rufa is still aser. Okay, let's look at question 14. Egla rufa. So what's the din after you actually broke its neck, or let's say you shechted it, or it died? So are they is it matami tumas nevelos? So once you did the actual rufa, it is matahir. If you did the shchita, it's also tahar. However, if it just died by itself, then it's tameya. Okay, so that's the distinction. It's always going to remove the tuma unless it dies by itself. That's what it says. Shemesa, that it dies by itself. Mechlal mechayim asura. Okay, that's it. Shemesa. So if it dies while on its own. However, again it says ki itzrach heichad shach mishchat betihani leishchita latahar midin avela. So again, when you do the shchita, it removes the tumas nevela. When you do the arufa, it removes the tumas nevela. When you use the when it dies by itself, not. And the question was, so therefore, do we compare an A's, Lashitas Rameir, to a behema, or do we say one's a behema, one's a daka, one's a gasa, or do we compare it to the birds, or we say, well, we can't compare it to the birds, because maybe when it comes to a bird, like a vazam v'tarnagoylim, even though it's not shaykh for the mizbeach, but at the very least, it's still the same min. It's a type of bird. Okay. Question TA20. Matzad sh'oraf A's. Why would you think, if you did the killing of the bird, a goat rather, but mukam a gala, instead of using a calf, you used a goat, and matamid tumas nevela. So you think it's not because you would just like an egla. Hasad shen matamid havi mina de behema. Right? It's like an egla, which it does remove the tuma. However, the reason why it would be matama is the la mina de eglahu, because one is a gasa, one's a daka. Let's get that down. This is TA20. So this is the kasha. Let's see it up top here. Oiref A's mahu avazim v'tarni goyim taimamai demi the oifasinu avol A's lav mini de eglahu odilma mina de behemahu. So why is it not right? Why is it not? It says shizu min gasa, and the other one's a daka. Okay, TB 23. Molok v'nimsas treifa rameir matahir. Ezu oid malikas oif psula carbon mikol makam matahir rameir mide nevela. Two answers. So I wrote avazim v'tarnagoylim. Definitely don't want to do an egla. And let's see. The other one is a balmum. Balmumin. That's what we're looking for. We're getting through this masechta, guys. It's not so simple, but we have a couple short dafim coming up. Doesn't mean they're going to be easy, but we are moving right along. Next Mishnah is Kol Zevachim. When it comes to all karbonos shinis arvu b'chatoy samesos o b'shor niskol afil achas baribu yimusu kulon. When it comes to them being all mixed together, what the din is going to be, we'll see that tomorrow. Adkan.